Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session about virtualization or vSphere and Xsan server. My name is Yoann Gini. I'm a French guy, so sorry for my accent. I work in France and in Europe as a freelancer for system and network architecture and administration, and also as a software developer. You may have seen some of my work related to Xsan, security things, smart cards, reverse engineering, and things like that on different mailing links and things like that. You may have used already some of my software like admin tool reduce or IRD inspector, things like that. Today we will talk about virtualization topic for Xsan server for a server side. This talk will be no demo at all, so you can still run away if you want. My intent to this talk is to give you the case as a system architect or a project manager to understand what you can do with Xsan server in a virtualized environment. Is it legal? What kind of hardware do I need to use? What kind of scale I can do with this kind of technology? Who use it? Am I the only one who try to do that? Or what kind of company have used it at this time? I will emphasize on some key features that you want to use with virtualization and Xsan server. Then some workflow, new way to work when you have to manage an Xsan server but in a virtualized environment. Some things could be interesting. And at the end, a small bite about Xsan. Does it work with virtualized systems? So, the first point I want to talk is about the legal things. You can read almost anything on this subject on the internet. It's not authorized, it's only authorized for 2 VMs per max, a lot of things. First thing to remember, I'm not a lawyer. So ask your legal department, what do they think about what I will show you? And the main idea is to start by reading the software license agreement. I know you never do that, but sometimes it's useful. We won't go to the whole SCD, but only some extract regarding the permitted licensing use and restriction. We have some part inside which is really interesting for you. The first one about pre-installed and single copy software license. So for all software that you buy with your Mac, the resume of the license is 1 copy on the originalware. So if you only buy, for example, Xsan server at the time it was cheap with a Mac Mini, you don't have the right to virtualize it. What is more interesting is when it's linked to a Mac App Store license. If you have obtained the OS X or Xsan server license from the Mac App Store. Here it's more interesting. The resume of that is a software coming from the Mac App Store can be assigned to a user or an hardware. For a single license obtained from the Mac App Store, you have the right to 2 additional copies of the installed license in a VM. So if you are running a Mac with an OS X that you have obtained from the Mac App Store, on this specific Mac you have 2 additional instances of the single license usable for 3 kinds of scenario in her case: development, testing, and using Xsan server. Plus, you can't do in any kind of way terminal server usage. So if you want to do time sharing and buy a light client, just go away. You can do that with the OS10 server instance. But in the meantime, they have nothing about using multiple distinct licenses of OS10 on a single hardware. Nothing talk about that. What about if you have distinct Apple ID, all with one license of OS10 or OS10 server, and you want them to use in a VM? Nothing talk about that. And nothing talk about what happens if you want to start your VM on other things than OS10. Still on Apple hardware, but the base OS is not OS10. It's something else. This is not covered by this part of the software license agreement. So, no OS10 at the base system and multiple dedicated licenses for one hardware. No mention of it in the software license agreement for application coming from the Mac App Store. If you have a license, a volume license or a maintenance license, so coming with a special agreement from Apple, this is simple. The number of licenses in the contract determines the number of copies you are allowed to use. Still, no mention of number of licenses per hardware. Regarding remote desktop connection, well, it's simple. No terminal server at all. And you have some other kind of restriction inside the software license agreement, who is no terminal server. And another one can be interesting. You can't rent the software license agreement. The end company or the end user has to agree and to own the system who is used. So that means, from my point of view, you shouldn't do anything related to Apple product as a service. If you want to sell Profile Manager as a service, that might not be allowed by the software license agreement. For example, if you are a company who creates continuous integration software for OS10 and iOS developer, you may not be able to rent a farm for building software on iOS and OS10. It may not be authorized by the SLA. So it's mainly to use for inside usage. Regarding the OS10 server software license agreement in particular, they have no occurrence of the word virtual or virtualization or things like that. Not at all. One copy per user or computer. Still the same that application coming from the Mac App Store, it can be licensed to a computer or to a user. You have the choice. And still no specification about multiple distant copy for one hardware. Nothing about that. However, as I remember, I'm not a lawyer, so ask your legal department to read carefully the software license agreement, make your own opinion, and do what you have to do. If we take a look at the architecture and support you have to use when you talk about virtualization in general. Most of the time, when you want to do virtualization is to improve your, the resilience of your network and to optimize the cost of it. So that means, in the end, the big picture is you have some storage somewhere connected to a Xsan, or if you have not enough money, something related to iSCSI with an IP network, multiple hardware server who will run the virtualization system, and some VM on it. What you will need on the storage side is something that can be accessed from different hosts in the same time. That means, most of the time, something we use SCSI in the back. So ISCSI or fiber channel. Most of the time, it's the best solution. You can use, if you have FC over Ethernet or things like that, anything you want, but most of the time it's it's a SCSI system on the back. All advanced scenario will need that. For all scenario where you have more than one hardware server accessing to your storage, you will need that because the storage will be shared with all virtualization server. And the virtualization system that we will use will need to access to your storage from two different initiators in the same time. So you need to have something on your storage side who allows this kind of usage. For example, if you are using network access storage, NAS, from Synology or for other vendors who are certified for VMware, sometimes you have to enable a specific settings on the storage. Even on Synology product who are certified for VMware, by default, the multiple sessions from multiple initiators are disabled. So this is something that you have to enable. For the SAN network, fiber channel over Ethernet, IP-based network, just remember one thing. This will be your bottleneck for everything related to input and output on the disk. This will be your serial data cable. This is what we will reduce the speed of the I/O. So if you plan to run something like a database on it, you may want to have a performance network, something more close to fiber channels than to IP-based. On the server side, for ESXi, the VMware hypervisor, who is at this time the most interesting for us. For ESXi only, what you need is Intel 64 bits compatible CPU, a lot of RAM, multiple Ethernet interface. 10 gigabit is better, but it's not mandatory, and that's all. And eventually, you need a fiber channel card if you want to access to fiber channel storage. But that's all you need for ESXi. A compatible Intel processor and a lot of RAM. And if you want to use your virtualization system for OS 10 based OS, you just have to install it on an Apple hardware. That's all. Regarding your virtual machine, if you use VMware product, you will be able to run almost any OS who are compatible with Intel processor, more or less. You will have support for EFI and just boot model. So almost everything you will need for your network. Regarding the network side, you will need an IP-based network. VLAN is better, but it's not mandatory. The same for 10 gigabytes. Don't forget that for one physical server, you will have multiple virtual one inside. So if you only have 1 or 2 gigabytes available, this will be shared by all VM inside. So that's why 10 gigabit or even more is better on this topic. If you have VLANs on your network, that you should have, you will send the trunk to your ESXi host. From a network architecture point of view, consider that your access switch or aggregation switch, depending on what kind of vocabulary you use, will be virtualized inside the ESXi. So that means from an organizational point of view, you may have some problem of responsibility between the system team and the network team. Depending of your budget and how you want to work, be aware that you are able to have virtualized Cisco product or whatever vendor product inside your vSphere system. So you can bring back the control to the access switch to the network team without any problem. So for example, if you use the virtualized switch from Cisco and you have a Cisco Prime infrastructure and things like that, you can integrate your virtualized switch to your monitoring system just like any other switch. If we take a look at the hardware we can use for OS X and OS X server, at this time, products supported by VMware are the Mac Pro. The last old one, the 5.1, from 5.5 to 6.0 in terms of ESXi version, and all current Mac Pro for ESXi 5.5 Update 2 and ESXi 6.0. The Xserve was supported back in time, but still it's something out of sale and out of support. It's no more supported. If you try to set up something with the new Mac Pro, you will know that you only have Thunderbolt port. You don't have any PCI interface accessible, and you don't have any built-in fiber channel things or 10 GB Ethernet, etc. So at this time, we have some third-party hardware was really interesting. The first one is the enclosure from Sonnet. The Rack Mac Pro, or maybe more interesting, the X Mac Pro, due to the built-in expansion system will allow you to put a PCI card inside. For fiber channel cards, we have ATTO product and premise product who are interesting and who support 8 or 16 GB of bandwidth, so that's fair enough. For 10 GB interface, we have Sonnet, ATTO, and Promise. Promise and ATTO propose also base T and SFP. So depending of what you need for your network. If you want to connect your Mac Pro to your 10 GB network via fiber channel, you can. I've asked all the vendors here, the 3 of them, regarding the support for their product for ESXi usage on a Mac Pro. For Sonnet, it works, and the documentation is in progress. They have no official support for what I have understand, but the documentation is in progress. So that means it works, but it hasn't been certified by VMware. For ATTO and Promise, the answer is the same. At this time, they have no support, but they are open to any feedback, and they wait for your request to make it an official to make an official support on it. If we look at that, it starts to be interesting, but you may want to think it's a bit expensive. If we compare the price of a whole setup with a Mac Pro and an X Mac Pro server and things like that, and a simple Dell server made for virtualization, it's almost the same price in the end. So if you take same kind of hardware, same kind of capabilities, it's almost the same price from the same list price from Apple World or PC World. You may have read somewhere that you can virtualize with a Mac Mini. Well, it's up to you. The thing you have to take in mind when talking about virtualization in Mac Mini you don't have any ECC memory on it. And you don't have a lot of memory on it. So it will be for a small setup, and you may have some error with it. They have no official support from VMware or from Apple on this subject. So for a smaller setup, it may work, but you won't have any support for anyone except the community. However, still many people using it, even on the Mac Mini. The installation of the Mac Mini is made possible nowadays by essentially by the work from William Lamb from VMware, a VMware engineer who, on the own time, manage a blog, animate a blog called Virtualization, and provide for almost every hardware renewal already package ESXi custom version who is able to run on the Mac Mini. So it's great work, and thanks to him. And still thanks to William, we have some success story who has been compiled and available on this blog. I've made a summary of it here, and I've listed which company work with vSphere on OS X on Apple hardware, for which case, and with which kind of hardware. The first one is VMware with a Mac Mini. They use it for their own developer forge to build and test their VMware Fusion and things like that. My own customer, I use it with a Mac Mini most of the time for developer forge and infrastructure server, so general server. My own lab, I use 5 Mac Mini inside with a Synology on the back, and it worked pretty well. Some others are using Mac Pro and Mac Mini in the same time for testing purposes or for infrastructure services, and for any kind of company. So school, Fortune something, and things like that. So all kind of company for all kind of usage already use vSphere on a Apple hardware using Mac Pro or Mac Mini differently. And for what we have been able to read, it's worked well. Regarding the expansion with Thunderbolt-based interface, still some feedback from the community. Pegasus product worked, Lassie Thunderbolt drive works, Sonnet chassis work, etc. So if you look at really how work Thunderbolt, it's just an expansion bus who use PCI inside. So as long as the chipset used on the end device is supported somehow by ESXi, it have all chance to work. Now, let's have a look about why you want to use a virtualized environment. The first one is for better resource usage. When you talk about total cost of ownership, it will be way better when you have virtualization. If you look at any of your current OS X server installed directly on a Mac, you will see that your CPU does nothing, your disk I/O does nothing, your network does almost nothing. What is more used is the memory. That's why you need a lot of memory on an hardware when you want to do virtualization things. Another feature interesting is the cloning. If you want to plan an update from a live server, you can clone your server without any service interruption, move the clone to another VLAN, do whatever you want to try your updates, and then apply to the prod one or move back your clone to the prod as you want. So for anything where you need pre-production operation on your server, it's a great tool to use. Another one is templating. If you are in a scenario where you create your server all the time, create new server, delete them and recreate it, etc. Like if you are doing software integration and software testing, you may want to use a template. The main idea is to create a base OS, not boot, and to duplicate it each time you need it. Just like a clone, but the original one has never been boot. Okay. Another one which is useful, really useful, is the hot migration. You have an old server running out of support, Xsan, and you want to move your service to a new one without any service interruption. If you use a classic Western server, you will have somehow some interruption. If you are good, it will be only 10 minutes, but it may be more. If you have a virtualized environment, you have to remember that the VM is a guest of the local OS, so the one who is really installed. So what you really need to do when you want to replace your virtualization hardware is just moving a VM. You will buy a new Mac, install ESX on it, and move your VM. And you don't have any service interruption when you do that. Your database is still running, your clients are still getting their information. You may have some slow network maybe during the operation, but you don't have any loss of service. Your service is still running during the migration. Another feature which is really interesting is using the ability to use an old system on a new hardware. When you use a virtualized system, you are able to install and run your Xsan Snow Leopard server on the new Mac Pro. This will work and this will be supported. If you have old PowerPC application was not be updated for whatever reason, you can run it on the new Mac Pro because Snow Leopard run on the VM and Snow Leopard still has Rosetta. If you still use an Western Snow Leopard server for your Open Directory master, you can still virtualize it. It's not a problem. Another feature is high availability. High availability is automatically enabled for all your guest VM in a cluster when you have a cluster in vSphere. And the idea is simply if you have a virtualization hardware who fell down, all VM who was running on this server are automatically booted from another one. So that means from the point of view of the guest OS, it's just a power failure. So that means all your database has been closed poorly and things like that. But in a minute or so, your system is back. You may have some data loss, but your system is back. Another feature, which is more expensive and not enabled by default, is fault tolerance. Fault tolerance takes 2 times the resource that you need. It's your VM running on 2 separate hardware in the same time, one in read and write mode, and the other one in read only. They do exactly the same operation in the same time, and if the main one has a problem, the second one automatically takes the lead. From the network point of view, here is what I see. I've pulled out the power outlet in the middle of the window. So 2 ping lost, and the service I was running to try it was QuickTime streaming server, making some tests with live video stream, and the service was still working. Just a small network outage. And this network outage is due to the time of row conversion of your switch. Because your switch has to learn that the MAC address of your server is not on one port but on another. This is just that. Now let's talk about process. The main idea is to start by creating template, instantiate those templates when you need it, make your customization to personalize the template for the purpose of your new server, operate your server, and sometimes recreate your template to be up to date. If we look at the tools we need for that, you have Mutable One. To create your base OS, you can still use existing solution. AutoDMG, System Image Utility, Deploy Studio, whatever you want will lead you to a DMG file. Then you can convert this DMG file to a VMDK, a VMware disk image. The base command line for that are built in VMware. So if you have VMware Fusion on your disk, you can do it with VMware World Disk Creator and VMware Disk Maker. This is a bit tricky, and someone called Joseph Chilcott, sorry if I misspell your name, have made a tool called vFuse, who package and who use this to VMware command line and just convert your disk, your DMG, automatically without any complex option to use. You just have to say if you want to use it for Fusion or for ESXi, because it's not the same kind of VMDK in the back, but that's all. When you have your VMDK, you update it to your ESXi server with VMware Fusion, with a client to administrate your ESXi server, with the web client of ESXi, with available only if you have a vSphere paid license, or via ICP. You can access via SSH to your ESXi server, so you can transfer your template by this way. When you want to instantiate a new server from your template, the tool to use is the VMware vSphere web client. This is the main tools nowadays to administer your vSphere cluster. It works from the Mac. You don't have to use any Windows at any point of the time if you use a paid license. vSphere web client at this time is only for licensed usage. If you use ESXi web client, ESXi free license, so no cluster and nothing like that, you can't have access to the vSphere web client. You're still stuck to the old Windows client. But if you pay for it, you have the web client who work well on the Mac. It's just a plugin who is installed on the Mac and run with Safari or Firefox. Yeah, question? So the question was, does the option with VMware Fusion administration require the Pro one? Yes, you have to use a VMware Fusion Pro license to have the feature to connect to an ESXi server. Yes. When it's time to customize your server, most recommended solutions are the ones you already use. Apple Desktop, Custom Script, Monkey, Deploy Studio. You may want to use Deploy Studio. It can work. first boot package, Puppet. If you have time, you can also use abstraction tools like OpenNebula or OpenStack or things like that, who can be customized to support OS X. It's not a problem. OS X is an Unix after all, so it's not a big deal to update Kickstart script for Linux to move them on OS X. It's not that complicated. And when you want to operate your system, you can still use Apple Remote Desktop, or you can use the vSphere web client, or eventually VMware Fusion. Let's take a look about the scenario of working here. If you are a small company, you may already use a Mac Mini with an external storage and run your service on it. For the same level of price, you do the same thing with a Mac Mini and a nice cozy NAS. Just a direct Ethernet link between the two, and you install ESXi on your Mac Mini, and you run 2 or 3 VM on it. One for OS X server, for example, with all needed services, and another one for Windows service, for Windows Server, if you need a terminal server, for example, to run all those non-Mac compatible accounting software. And when you evolve, you may want to add some other VM. So on one Mac Mini, it may be little problematic. So you can evolve without any service interruption to something more interesting with maybe multiple Mac Pro, still using a nice cozy NAS or moving to more classical NAS, and have your OS X server providing all main services, your Windows Server still providing remote desktop services, and some Linux for web service and network monitoring maybe. Or you can also do something else. Use mainly Windows Server and Linux Server, and eventually use OS X Server sometime for only MDM, low-cost MDM, or maybe just the caching service. You can build your virtualization cluster with Mac and don't really use it for run any OS X. Since it's almost the same kind of price for the same level of feature, you may want to invest by default on Mac hardware, and maybe sometime you will need an OS X on it. It's not that stupid. It's the same price for the same feature and the same amount of hardware, of processor and RAM. You can do this thing. Now, what about Xsan? Who still uses Xsan? Am I the only one? Oh. Oh. Well.
That's it.
Okay. Move to the next slide. If you know Xsan, Xsan is a clustered file system based on the StoreNext framework. And officially, if you accept the Apple documentation, it says that you have to use a fiber channel access to it and things like that. In the fact, it just needs an SCSI-based storage with shared access to the same SCSI index. That's the only thing. And regarding a cluster file system and ESXi, you can virtualize a cluster file system. You have 2 methods for that. Full virtualized one. That means you have a shared VMDK between multiple guest OS. The constraint in this scenario is you must run all guest OS on the same ESXi host. So that's not really useful for production scenario, but for lab or for training purpose, you can use it on a single machine, on a single host. That means if you are a training center, you can do your Xsan class on a single Mac Mini. You pass from a $30,000 setup for 2 students to less than $1,000. Interesting one. For production setup, you need physical devices with FCOE or regular FC, accessible from the ESXi host. You need your real LAN accessible on the SAN, just like a real Xsan setup. And in the VM setup, you can make a link between your guest and a target initiator on the SAN. So you can access to the physical SAN from the guest OS directly. This is called row mapping. For your information, I've just tested the virtual one, and it works pretty well, with not the real performance of an Xsan, but if you have some testing needs, you can run your Xsan on a Mac Mini with 2 or 3 Xsan clients and metadata controller and things like that. The only thing to take care is the ACSI index. You must assign the same index to your VMDK or to your LAN for all VM. Otherwise, this will mix up and this don't work. If you need the documentation for this subject, you have the VMware documentation to set up a failover clustering system with Microsoft Cluster Service. It works exactly the same as Xsan. So you can just follow this documentation, convert the word in the Xsan language, and it will work. This talk is done for the plain things. I've let some time I've let many time for question, and if the internet is working, and if you have any configuration related question, I can try to connect to my lab in France to show you anything you want, just if the internet is working. However, during this week, you have 3 other sessions who will talk about virtualization, life in a post-6 world, automatic testing with VMware Fusion, and virtualization and OS X testing. 2 days and tomorrow. Those talks are complementary to my one. Since those people are already talking about production things and how way work and how you will configure it and use it, my talk is already focused on big picture. So I encourage you to go to this session and see what you can do more specifically. And especially the one who has created vFusion, do one of this talk. So thank you. Don't forget the feedback sheet. And if you have any question, please use the microphone so it can be recorded. And I think some people from ITTO, Promise, or Sonnet might be in the assistance. So find them and ask them for official support. Question? Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
How do you purchase that ESXi version? Because is it included in the vSphere license? Or?
So the question is, how do you buy ESXi things and vSphere? Regarding the pricing model and the sell model of VMware, ESXi, so the base OS that you will install on your Mac, is free. You can get it for $0. You just download it on the VMware website, and it will work by default on a Mac Pro. If you want advanced feature like clusterization setup, management tools, high availability of fault tolerance, you have to pay for a license. Depending on what you need.
Well, let's talk about this web client you already mentioned, right?
Yes. Depending on what you need, if you have three or less than three hardware to use, you can use what is called a starter license or essential kit with VMware. Essential kit to use only the web client, just for the administration tools, is $500. If you need the feature like fault tolerance, automatic system migration from one host to another, etc., this costs around $4,500, up to 3 computers with 2 processors on it, so it will work with the Mac Pro. If you have more than 3 hardware, you have to buy dedicated license, and the price is different depending on what you need.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
What made you think of trying Xsan?
Sorry?
What made you try to think in Xsan virtually?
So why I try to use Xsan virtually? Because I'm still using Xsan in the real world, and I was just thinking about if I can run Xsan on my Mac Mini with vSphere, I can do whatever I want with it, and I can trust it. So it may not be useful in the real world. However, when I lead some training regarding Xsan, this can be really helpful. And also this helped me in my lab to recreate my customer environment. And when we have some problem linked to Xsan, I can reproduce the bug on my setup without having to buy a full SAN and things like that. Yeah. Yes?
Does ESXi have any hardware graphics acceleration for OS X? Because like Yosemite running under VMware Fusion is painful.
Yes. I didn't test it. However, ESXi 6.0 is able to use the graphical card from the Mac Pro. So somehow you may have some improvement regarding VMware Fusion. But I didn't have the occasion to test it correctly. Yes?
Can you manage your OSX host and your existing vCenter infrastructure?
So the question is, if you already have a vCenter infrastructure, can you manage your OS X server inside? The only thing you need to manage an OS X server inside a vSphere infrastructure is a Mac hardware to run the ESXi. However, if you already have a farm who is built and already have your process to use it, etc., you can fit to it. You can still add access to your OS X console from a PC if you have the vSphere client on a PC. You are not stuck to OS X client to administrate an OS X server. Moreover, if you are familiar to tools like OpenNebula and things like that, you can access to your virtualization setup and your virtualized OS X server from OpenNebula web client, for example. So that means you can, if you are a company with developer and you want to make them use, whenever they want, create new VM and test something and delete it, you can set up an OpenNebula system with an abstraction over virtualization environment. And with OpenNebula, you can create your template, use your template from vSphere, and let them instantiate, use, and delete your OS X VM from a simple web client from any kind of OS. So you will be able to use all features from VMware. The only limitation is, in the end, the OS X VM has to run on an Apple hardware. This is the only limitation. For the rest of vSphere things, it works exactly the same. Regarding the installation and the setup, follow any kind of vSphere documentation, it will be the same. They have no difference from the ESXi point of view if it's run on a Mac or any other supported hardware. Regarding licensing, since it costs some money, if you need licensing version, it may be interesting to use a Mac Pro, because you will have to pay support in the license. So it's sad to pay a support that you can't use because you have used the Mac Mini. Mac Mini is interesting if you have a lab purpose or a single machine with a free or ESXi license. As soon as you use a paid one, it can be interesting to have a Mac Pro just to be able to use the support. Any other question? We have the time, so is the internet work? I can show you some setup if you want. Sure. Tell me.
Yeah.
Well, it don't start really well. Let's see if another one works. Ouais. Mm-hmm. If the internet works. Well. Sorry? Can try with network cable, maybe. Any other question in the meantime? Yeah.
I've read a couple places that if you virtualize the OS X server, you can't use a caching server.
Yeah. One thing to know about OS X virtualization on VMware product, even if it's VMware Fusion, you have special settings to add in the VMX file, the config file with, in the end, a text file for VMware, who say use 12-character serial number things. If you don't put these settings, the serial number inside inside the VM will be too long, and all Apple-related services will have a problem. However, if you ask specifically on this VM to use a short version serial number, it will work.
There's kind of a related setting that can pass through the hardware identifier of the computer. If you have some installer that is very picky about what hardware it will install on, at least in Fusion, it claims to be a VMware 7,1 machine. Some software will complain that they can't absolutely determine whether it's supported hardware.
Well, I'm sorry because I don't have any internet access, so I won't be able to show you anything since it's a bit difficult to bring a VMware cluster in the plane. Any other question? Yeah. Question? No? Okay. Thank you, everybody.